I want to play a clip of one of the women in this meeting. She herself was a hostage with her children. They were freed, but her husband is still inside. She says that no one was doing anything for them, she says, and that Israeli shelling actually wounded them. Take a listen.
You will return them all. They will not wait 50 days. They will not wait another year because you claim that they are strong enough. You have no information. You have no information. The fact that we were shelled, the fact that no one knew anything about where we were.
You just heard from a freed Israeli hostage just tearing into Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over his handling of the war in Gaza, over his handling of the hostages that remain captive in the Gaza Strip. And really, it's no secret that the family members of these hostages had been tearing into Benjamin Netanyahu and the current coalition government over its handling of a number of issues involving this war. There had been reports indicating that they were furious with Netanyahu and certainly concerned about the well-being of the hostages, given the aerial bombardment that has been leading to incredibly high civilian death tolls on the Palestinian side. But now we really have a better understanding of that rage and the rage that the freed hostages and their family members have about the military operations that Bibi is overseeing in Gaza. So with that said, let's talk a little bit more about what was heard in this audio and what's been reported about it ever since. So it's important to know that the audio was actually leaked to an Israeli news site known as ynet. This is why we know about the meeting that Netanyahu had with the freed hostages and how they actually feel about his leadership. The same freed hostage that we heard from earlier in the story is who we're gonna read some quotes from now, because later in the audio, she also told Netanyahu, quote, "The feeling we had there was that no one was doing anything for us. The fact is that I was in a hiding place that was shelled and we had to be smuggled out and we were wounded. That's besides the helicopter that shot at us on the way to Gaza." So I've been dying to know what the hostages had been experiencing in regard to the aerial bombardment that's been taking place in Gaza, because remember, when Israel blocks the entry of humanitarian aid, that means food, water, fuel. When Israel engages in these aerial bombardments, in this bombing, it's not just simply going to impact the Palestinian lives that have been lost, which is, by the way, deplorable and terrible enough. But if they genuinely cared about the hostages, they would maybe reconsider whether these military operations make sense, because the hostages are dealing with these actions as well. And here we have a hostage making abundantly clear that they were terrorized by the shelling. They were terrorized by the bombing. And some of them did in fact get injured and wounded as a result. Now, Hamas had made statements like that previously, and they should be dismissed if you ask me, because of course Hamas is gonna say that. But if you have a freed hostage calling out Benjamin Netanyahu in this private meeting, which luckily we have audio of, then it means no, there is now evidence coming from the mouth of one of the freed hostages that these military operations did jeopardize their lives. Now, she also says that throughout the time we were there, we felt abandoned twice. Once on Saturday, October 7th, when you did not protect us, and a second time every day that passes that we are not released. We didn't believe we would be there for so long. So they felt that the Netanyahu government was not really interested in freeing them and saving them. Netanyahu, of course, disagrees with this take, and we'll get to his statements in just a moment. But the former abductee also continues referencing her husband, who is still held captive, and she's really worried about him for good reason. She says, "Do you think the men are strong? My husband would beat himself every day, punch his face until it bled because it was too much for him, and now he is alone and God knows under what conditions." So she desperately wants action, and what she is not in favor of is what the IDF is currently considering, which is flooding the tunnel system in Gaza with seawater. We'll also get to that in just a moment, because there's concern that the remaining hostages are being held in those tunnels, and drowning out the tunnels means drowning out potentially the hostages as well. And then she also says, and you want to topple the Hamas government to show that you have bigger balls? There is no life here that is more important than others. None of us there deserve any less treatment than any resident of Israel. Return them all, and not in a month, 2 months, or a year. So she's incredibly clear. And my heart breaks for her. I can't imagine being in her shoes, having a loved one held captive in the Gaza Strip by Hamas. I would be beside myself. And I would be just as furious, if not more furious, with Benjamin Netanyahu. So I give her a lot of credit for being willing to confront him about this and being willing to share what she experienced firsthand as she was held captive in the Gaza Strip. At one point in the audio, people actually started chanting shame or shouting shame at Netanyahu. And Netanyahu decided now's a good time to actually defend, my military actions. He argued, well, listen, if it weren't for the aerial bombardment applying pressure to Hamas, we very likely would never get any agreement to exchange hostages for Palestinian prisoners, right? But what's interesting is some of the other individuals who were previously held captive and now have been freed are arguing, no, I think maybe you should free all of the prisoners. Do it now. We want our family members back. We want our, fellow Israeli civilians back. Now, with that said, referring to reports that the Israeli military is considering flooding Hamas tunnels in Gaza, she says this, and you're talking about washing the tunnels with seawater. You are shelling the route of tunnels in the exact area where they are, meaning where the remaining hostages are. The girls ask me, where is their father? And I have to tell them that the bad guys don't want to yet release them. And it's unclear if she's referring to Netanyahu when she refers to the bad guys, or if she's referring to Hamas, or maybe both. But I say that because she's just completely dressing him down, Netanyahu, and she's just totally tearing into him. And so I feel like she meant that statement for Netanyahu, but I want to be clear that it's unclear who she was referring to there. And she also adds, quote, you put politics above the return of the kidnapped. Now, this freed Israeli hostage wasn't the only one at the meeting who was absolutely incensed by Netanyahu and the IDF. A former captive from kibbutz near Oz, who was recently released as part of the deal, also told Netanyahu the following: I experienced captivity and I understand its hardships. Every day in captivity was extremely challenging. We were in tunnels, terrified that it would not be Hamas, but Israel that would kill us. And then they would say, Hamas killed you. That is an incredible statement. It really is. I mean, confronting Netanyahu about this is an important thing to do, and I'm very happy to hear that this former hostage was willing to say that to him to his face. But it's also so true. I mean, imagine you're already scared for your life. You've already been kidnapped. You're already, in tunnels, in some cases sweltering heat because there's no ventilation in those tunnels. It is a scary, scary situation. You don't know what happened to your other loved ones as the atrocities were being committed. And then on top of all of that, they're hearing and experiencing the aerial bombardments as well. I would be afraid for my life as well, not just due to the fact that I had just been kidnapped by Hamas, but because my own government, which should be working hard to save me, to free me, is engaging in aerial bombardments that could very likely kill me, and it seems like they don't even care. Like that's the sense that they were getting, which is why, again, I give this hostage a lot of credit for sharing that perspective with Netanyahu. Now, I don't think it's gonna be persuasive, we'll see, but it is important for him to be confronted by this perspective. There's more though. One man related what family members had told him after being freed, quote, they were under constant threat from the IDF shelling. You sat in front of us and assured us that it does not threaten their lives. They also roam the streets and are not only in the tunnels, they are mounted on donkeys and carts, meaning the hostages. You will not be able to recognize them on the street and you are endangering their lives. It is our duty to return them now. So again, yet another individual, in this case, a family member of one of the hostages, making abundantly clear, you're risking the lives of our loved ones through these military operations. A parent whose son was kidnapped told the meeting, it was his son's birthday, and asked, "What do you have to say to him? He saved people there, you abandoned him." And again, I just want to emphasize that it's not just the aerial bombardments, it's not just the military operations conducted by the IDF that they were concerned about. They also brought up the fact that food was sparse. It was difficult to find food because of the humanitarian blockade. Every day that passes is a game of roulette in their lives. Why don't you release Palestinian prisoners, please, or release them all and bring them hostages back? They live on borrowed time. And I want to just give you one other moment from this meeting in which Netanyahu felt the need to respond to some of the criticisms. So referring to a dog tag with the name of a hostage that he had been given, Netanyahu said, quote, "The dog tag you gave me is by my bed, it's in my heart." But the father retorted, "You don't put it on your neck because you're ashamed," to which Netanyahu responded, "Absolutely, absolutely not." When Netanyahu said Hamas was to blame for the end of the truce, an individual identified by ynet as a family member of a released hostage replied, "Nonsense." So look, there's a lot of reporting about how the truce came to an end. Fog of war, I felt uncomfortable with all of these reports because it's hard for me to parse out what is true and what is not true. Obviously, Israel is blaming Hamas, Hamas is blaming Israel. I'm not gonna repeat the lies of either side, and I'm not gonna misinform anyone in my audience about it. I think we're gonna have to wait and see how the truce really fell apart. But in the meantime, it is interesting to hear from the actual hostages in a closed door meeting, right? Like, I don't buy the BS about like, oh, the hostages as they were being, released by Hamas, a heavily armed Hamas, said that they were treated really well. They seemed super happy. Like, I'm not gonna fall for that. But I do trust in their statements and what they're willing to say behind closed doors to Benjamin Netanyahu's face. And so I think that everyone should consider what they have gone through, what they are worried about, and the critiques that they are sharing in regard to Benjamin Netanyahu's government and how they have carried out this war in Gaza.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.